Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. I hope that all is well with you and your family. I hope that you are in the best of health and in the best of spirits. Today, I'm going to share with you analyzing my professional growth plan for our course 8407. And this is designed to just kind of help make sure that you understand how these frameworks work together and how we can use these frameworks as we are working on looking at and analyzing our current professional growth and a way that we can think about the future for continued professional growth and how all of this can help us have not just any kind of professional growth, but high impact, where we see that the result is positive in our classrooms. All right. So let's take a look at this together. So the first framework, and this is based on the article that is shared with you. This is based on Kennedy's framework. Kennedy looks at two types of capacities. Okay. There's the transmissive capacity, and then there's the transformative capacity. And essentially, when we look at these two, according to Kennedy, they are very different. The way that we develop our professional growth, the way that we view our professional growth. For example, if it's transmissive, it's skills based. And skills based usually focuses on I want to be compliant. I want to make sure that I am proficient. I want to make sure that my professional development is going to allow me to show that as a teacher, as a coordinator, my work is compliant, it is meeting the standard. Transformative, it focuses more on agency and systemic change, changing like over a period of time because you essentially are trying to develop some kind of leadership aspect, or you're trying to develop some kind of self-efficacy, or you're trying to upskill and upscale yourself. So transformative really focuses on I want to see myself do this professional development. I want to see myself do professional growth. I want to experience professional growth because I see myself as an expert. I see myself as a researcher. I see myself as a leader, as someone who's really wanting to impact change and not just do the status quo. In other words, not just do what's required of me or what's going to make me compliant or that shows that I am, getting 100 hours, right? So when we look at Kennedy's framework and how we distinguish these two, your task in your midterm is to help me understand where do you see yourself in between these two, right? Do you see yourself growing more towards skill-based, or do you see yourself growing more towards leadership-based? And then in the middle of these two, is what we call transitional. Transitional is where we see ourselves, yes, we're thinking about, standards. We're thinking about making sure that I meet the requirements. We want to make sure that when I get my performance review, I have, a good performance review. But I am, also thinking about next steps. So I'm just kind of like in a transitional, I'm in the middle of, being transmissive and being transformational. When we look at the spectrum of growth, if you look here, you'll notice transmission, you see a lot of training is happening. You see that there's a lot of work that you will engage in because you want to make sure that you see something very quickly come from it. So like, for example, very quickly, or over maybe a month or two, you'll see this happen, right? At the end, you'll have 100 credit hours. You'll have a certificate of attendance, a certificate of of participation. So that is very transmissive, right? But transformational, on the other hand, is yeah, I get my certificates, I get, I participated, I have grown from this experience. But transformative means now I'm going to do an action research project, right? I'm going to use what I've learned and now I'm going to create some change. I'm going to um, share an innovative idea. I'm going to try to have an impact in my students, not just in their grades, but maybe their motivation and their engagement. And so I'm going to implement a new strategy, or because I learned this from a workshop, I'm going to talk to my coordinator about implementing this new idea for all of my colleagues and I that are teaching across this subject, or different grade levels, same subject. So that is very transformative, right? So where do you see yourself in this spectrum? There is no right or wrong answer. You just have to be able to explain to me and to share, this is where I am right now. This is where I think I might go. This is where I hope maybe I could be, or given my factors or my circumstances, this is where I am right now. And I see myself, in a very transitional stage. Okay. One other thing. Transformation also requires a lot of coaching and mentoring. And a lot of times in transitional stage, you'll see a lot of, coaching and mentoring also continue, because why? You're in a state of, like, where do I go from here? Right. So you'll lead, I'm sorry, you you will kind of lean towards, yeah, that's what I want to say. You'll lean towards maybe collaborating with people who are like-minded with you. You might also in this stage want to join, or you might become a part of like a PLC, right? A professional learning community, because these are other colleagues who are also doing similar work as you. This is where you also see communities of practice form. So think about, really think about, where do I see myself in this spectrum of growth and why? When it comes to doing an audit, a self-audit, or a self-inventory, what we have to do is we have to think about, where am I right now in my own growth? Um, do I have a goal? Do I have very specific goals? And are these goals that I have identified? Are these goals that others have identified? Meaning, like, maybe my line manager, my vice principal, my coordinator. And then also, what is the outcome of this? Do I want just a certificate, or do I want to change my classroom practice, right? Also, does your professional growth plan right now, does it include any like systemic questioning? Like, do you question, or do you, have inquiry, or do you, have thoughts or insights about, what's currently happening in your school, in your classroom? Do you have open dialogue? Do you have open conversations about that at your school, in your context where you're working, teaching? And then also collaboration. Does what you want to do require collaboration with others? Does it involve other people? Does it involve leadership supporting? Does it involve just you only, right? Who is a part of your growth plan? Typically speaking, um, we usually generally have a combination, right? Some of it is going to be individual, right? And then it's going to be also collaborative, because we don't learn and we don't grow in silos, right? We learn and we grow and we develop individually, collaboratively, collectively. And so your plan should, it should, highlight that, right? It should highlight work that you do in your departments. It should highlight work that you do individually, as a teacher who delivers a curriculum to a grade level, and you have ownership and some, accountability and autonomy over that. The key thing that I want to make sure that you all understand is that transformative professional growth plans, they move beyond just you being trained, and they move you towards being empowered and able to think about leading. It also means that if you are transformative, right? If this is where you are on the spectrum, it means that you are your agency and the responsibility that's given to you is around helping improve the school. It's around helping improve conditions for teaching and learning. It's around having some high impact, some visible impacts. If you are considering yourself, in the transformative phase of your professional growth, there has to be visible, tangible evidences of that, right? So, school improvement plan, increase in students' marks, increase in student attainment over 2 report cards or over a term or 2 terms or over, you see what I mean? There has to be like some kind of long-term evidence. But the reality is that, and I just want to go back for just a quick second, with transmissive, a lot of times it's short-term gain, short-term evidence, short-term goals. Transformative, short and long-term, right? Goals, long-term evidences, and long-term impact. And then if you're in the middle here, you're just trying to figure out, right? You're in the transitional phase of the spectrum. Then this is basically, this is where I am right now, right? I have done some work, and I see growth in some of what I have done as being transmissive, but I also see that I'm moving now towards transformative growth, or wanting to have transformation in my growth. Readiness. Am I prepared to grow? So professional growth doesn't happen in a vacuum. You have to analyze factors in your specific context to see, are you ready? Are you able? For example, physical factors. Does the layout of your school support collaboration? Are there workspaces? Is there time allocated in your schedule where you are able to get together and collaborate and discuss student data or student analysis of students' work? Or are you able to, do think pair shares with, colleagues around lesson planning? Social factors. Is there a culture of trust? So, for example, are you, in a context where you feel that, yes, we want you to try things, right? We trust that you'll do the right thing. We want to give you autonomy to make some decisions on your own. You don't have to necessarily do what your colleague is doing, or what all your colleagues are doing, in the math department, for example. Or is there hierarchy? Is there micromanagement? Is there, are there levels of, control? Less autonomy given to you or provided? What are the factors socially, right? And then virtually, are there any digital platforms? So like, for example, if you're moving towards, being transformative, do you have, digital platforms at your disposal? Do you have, for example, the latest technologies? Do you have, actual tools? Do you have devices? Do you have subscriptions? Does your school have subscriptions to Padlet, or, some of the other, amazing Schoology like platforms, right? So here you have to ask yourself this question: do these factors support my professional growth, my lifelong learning? Does it support, does it promote my readiness, right? My ability to really grow, as a professional teacher? Or does it hinder? Does it block me? Do I have roadblocks? Readiness is the bridge between you planning and you actually having the self-actualization actually happen, right? So readiness, I'm ready, I'm doing, I'm implementing, I'm transforming. Or Readiness, I'm wanting, I'm hoping, but there are some things that are blocking and impeding me being able to move and being able to transform. So you have to be very honest here and very authentic. What else does the research say? Well, another article by Sims and Fletcher Wood is about, how teachers grow and develop. And this is just, again, I'm going to give you like just an overview. And this is like, again, a framework that you can also use. I want you to use, as a lens to look at professional growth. What is effective professional growth? What does it mean when we say professional growth leads to professional development? The reality is, according to Sims and Fletcher Wood, professional growth and development, right? So if I grow over time, I can hopefully see development, right? Can I develop without growing? No. I have to be able to go through stages and phases, right? That's how we grow. Think about the plant that grows from a seed, then it blossoms, it blooms, and develops into this really beautiful thing, right? Growth has to happen for development, right? To occur. It has to be sustained and it has to be focused. The thing that Sims and Fletcher, they kind of, the thing that they kind of share with us, is like this warning about teachers who go and just do a lot of PD sessions everywhere. They see a topic and they go, oh, this is really interesting, fascinating. I want to do it. I'll implement it tomorrow. It's not really possible, right? And you should be very particular and you should be very keen about which activities you're going to engage in. Also, you should make sure that if you want professional development to be prolonged, like over a period of time, make sure that you are attending different kind of events. So not just workshops, and definitely not just a one-off workshop, but workshops that are done, like, for example, in stages. So like, for example, stage one, then stage two, then stage three, or part one, then part two, then part three. And then also collaboration and peer support. You have to get a benefit from working with colleagues, sharing experiences and learning from each other, because the reality is that you all help fill each other's blanks, right? So there might be something that you know that I don't know. Maybe you attended a summit that I didn't get a chance to, and you learned something. You have an answer to a question that I have. How would we be able to support each other if we don't spend time together, right? And if we don't share experiences and, teach and learning, and learn from each other. Feedback and coaching, they really do have an important place. They are very important processes. You have to be willing to accept constructive feedback. Sometimes we get our teacher evaluations and our performance reviews, and the feedback might be something like slow down your pace when you're delivering content. Well, that's very valid. Why might we need to slow down? Well, perhaps if you're speaking too fast, your students can't grasp what you're sharing, what you're saying, what you're explaining, your examples, what you're illustrating. So sometimes we get constructive feedback that we don't quite understand why. But the reality is if we will do a little bit more self-reflection and we'll think about, well, what are the implications for my students? If I slow down and I explain and then I ask and I check for understanding versus I talk really, really fast and I just give you the information and I share maybe an example illustration and I move on to the next point, right? Those are two totally different experiences. What kind of experience do you want your students to have? And then last but not least, growth is about learning to identify and accepting strategies. So you have to be able to accept, for example, if your colleague or your coordinator or a vice principal or another teacher that works with you in your department, if they are sharing a strategy, be willing to accept it. Be willing to, say, aha, let me give that some thought. That could really possibly help me transform. It might even help me think about things differently or metacognitively. And if I'm willing to do that versus, nope, 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 I've been teaching for 20 years. You can't tell me anything I don't already know, right? You're not going to grow. You're not going to grow. You have to make sure that you have a growth mindset, right? Not a fixed mindset, right? A growth mindset, an open mindset. You are willing to grow, and you know that not only will it benefit you, but it will also benefit your students because there's so many nuances and things that are changing in teaching and learning. It's hard to catch up. It's hard to keep up. So we just need to know that we have to be at least willing to try to catch up and be willing to try to keep up and to better ourselves so that we can create better conditions for teaching and better conditions for our students learning and support them in their attainment and in their achievements. Agency versus organizational reality. So agency, if you're talking about transformative growth, you're saying basically that you're not talking about what is required. You're not talking about what happened. You're talking about what is possible. People who say that they are in the transformative, part of the spectrum, they say that basically, I am an agent of change, and basically, this is what needs to be done, and this is what I'm doing to move things forward, right? But you have to also make sure that if that's what you're saying, you're wanting to do, you have to also make sure that you're saying that your current structure, your organization, your school allows you to do that, right? The mechanisms are set up in place for that. If I were to come and do a school visit and I were to come observe you, and you said, for example, I see my growth as very transformative. My growth is, allows me to transform the teaching and learning community. I've created, I've innovated, I've took initiative. And then I come and I see you rote teaching. I see you teaching using textbooks only, no student-centered, no learning-centered, orientation towards, supporting students or supporting through differentiation. I don't see any evidence of, anything beyond what we were doing in 1950s. Then I wouldn't say you are, that you are demonstrating transformative growth. I would say it's more transmissive, right? So just really be so honest and be so clear and be very authentic about what is my reality. Is there PD scheduled? Are there resources? Is agency encouraged? There is no right or wrong answer here. It's just about what is the authentic answer. And then you providing information, examples, evidences in your slides so that I can see that you really do understand where you are in terms of your growth on the spectrum. So there is a well-being correlation. There's a well-being correlation for teachers and a well-being correlation for students when it comes to growth, teacher growth, professional growth. When you grow, you build efficacy. When you build efficacy, you build awareness. You start to feel as though you are a problem solver, you are a change maker, you are a person who is creating sustainable ways of, improving things. And so when you feel good and you feel good about your work, the way you show up in your classroom, it mirrors that, right? Your attitude and your disposition reflect how you're feeling, how you're emoting, what you're thinking about yourself, and what you're thinking about and feeling about the work that you do. So that in turn creates dynamic, engaging, responsive classrooms. The difference between the teacher who comes to school, oh boy, another class, I've got to teach this subject. Everyone have a seat in your desk versus I just figured out a way to help these students understand the life cycle of a plant. And we're going to dig our heels in and we're going to create a garden. We're going to build. We're going to grow. We're going to, students are going to put things in their hands, right? Because I attended this amazing series on how to get students interested in STEM or in STEAM, right? And so now, because I feel really confident, I have new ideas, things that I can enact, new information. I'm developing a new way of doing things. Now my students are going to get the benefit of that. There is a loop, if you will, and that loop is that professional growth, right? When it happens, when you grow, not being stagnant, but growing, means teacher efficacy, teacher well-being, and that enhanced well-being leads to your students' well-being and your students flourishing. So think about this in your slide and in your assignment. Where do you see the correlation here, right? Do you see that, yes, I understand how important this is, and I can see that my well-being impacts my students' well-being, or I see that my burnout, I'm feeling burnt out right now, is impacting my students because I don't have the same kind of energy, I don't have the same kind of vibe. No answer is the wrong answer. We just want you to be authentic and we want you to be reflective. What is happening right now in your professional growth? High impact professional development. So remember, effective growth leads to sustained development, right? I don't develop if I don't grow. So according to Sims and Fletcher, effective professional development relies on mechanisms, right? It means that you have to have a cognitive load that is manageable. It means that you can't have 1,000 things that you're responsible for and you're expected to do all of them exceptionally well. It also means that you have to have some very specific, targeted, realistic goals, right? And that you're moving towards those goals persistently, diligently, consistently. Kennedy also emphasizes long-term sustainability, right? You have to have some very deep pedagogical focus. I want to change my practice because dot, 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 right? Because not only does the research say that I should, but my students are letting me know that they need me to, right? Current times call on current measures and strategies and approaches. And that means, right, that we have to give some very deep thought to what we are doing in terms of how we're supporting, student learning, using the tools, the resources, and the approaches. One thing that I also want to just mention here is the collaborative piece. It is so important. Kennedy talks a lot about the collaborative inquiry, the asking of the questions and finding out answers together, right? Teachers who sit in classrooms are rarely teachers that prompt change. Teachers who keep secrets to themselves because they don't want to share or they're worried of sabotage are oftentimes teachers who are the first ones to leave. Teachers who try to wear a hat or they try to, take on 15 different roles and 15 different jobs, but they're really only good at one. These are the teachers that get burnt out because they don't have a realistic expectation of themselves, and they become very overwhelmed quickly. So where do you see your growth? Do you see your growth in terms of, I want it to become sustainable, I want it to be based on mechanisms, I want it to be high impact? And what about your student growth? I want my students to flourish. I want them to have positive outcomes. I know the way I show up to class is the way my students are going to respond, and the way that I show up to teach lessons will have a direct impact on how they respond and engage in the lesson and in the learning and the activities. Your self-inventory, this is like a checklist, all right? Your self-inventory at this stage is, do I see myself transmissively or do I see myself transformatively? You'll go through each, right? You'll look at the objectives here and you will basically tick boxes where they are applicable to you, right? So look at the transmissive indicators. Do these apply to you? If so, tick, 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 tick. Definitely transmissive. Look at the transformative indicators. Do these apply to you? If they do, tick, 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 tick. My inventory shows me very clearly, right, that my current growth is transmissive, or my current growth is transformative, or I am in transitional phase, moving between transmissive, hopefully going towards transformative. This is the self-inventory that you'll see noted in Canvas. I believe it's in week 6 to 8. This is that self-inventory, that self-audit that you'll be doing. You don't have to provide the checklist to me, but you do have to mention it in your slide. You have to mention it that you've completed the inventory, and that based on the checklist that you've done, the indicators all indicate transmissive growth, transformative growth. Last but not least, everything that we do has to be aligned to UAE teacher standards, because those are the national standards that we use to frame the work that we do in K-12 classrooms or pre-K-12 classrooms here in the UAE. So of course, you already know the 4 standards. I've just reiterated them here again. And then what I've done is I've also just, to help kind of with, synthesizing all of this, I've just kind of made, a little bit of like points. I've just added a few, points around how this journey that you're taking is really about also helping you move through the standards, right? With more efficacy, with more efficiency, with more, self-confidence. And the reality is that, yes, you may be meeting all 4 standards, but there is always room to grow, right? There's always room for you to grow and for you to hone or refine or, reshape or re-explore. And so I want you all just to remember that, and that your growth as a professional teacher is also a commitment in itself to you being the best teacher you can, and also helping the nation address and reach, its commitments and its priorities around making UAE schools, a priority, and also making the experiences that students have in UAE schools powerful and meaningful. So you being willing to grow professionally has a direct implication, and it shows a direct commitment that you make towards advancing the United Arab Emirates towards educational excellence and academic excellence. Okay, I hope that that was helpful. And feel free to reach out if you have any questions or any concerns, or if you, just want to get a little bit more information about something. I'm happy to support. The articles are there in our modules. I downloaded them for you. Feel free to, use this again, also to kind of help you understand the readings, but also to, use this piece to help you navigate and, complete your, your midterm. You're completing those slides, inshallah. This will be very, very helpful for you. I hope everyone has a wonderful, wonderful week ahead, and stay safe. And inshallah, we will see each other sooner rather than later. Take care, everyone. Ma'as-salama. Ma'as-salama. Have a wonderful, wonderful day and week ahead.